We're preparing to go live. Welcome, everybody. Okay, we have a bunch of people coming in. Hey, Brad. Hey, Christopher. Nice to see you again. Louis, we have a guest. Loretta, Pat, Ryan, Sharon, Vicky. A bunch of people coming in. And let me mute that. And we have a bunch of people on Instagram. We have Sammy808, guessing from Hawaii. Wildcraft Herbs is joining as well. Ground Bites, Brunette 716, Sasha T, welcome y'all. And a couple other people coming in on Zoom. So tonight we are going to be talking about how to restore a youthful immune system. And really my goal for tonight is essentially for you to understand what happens as you get older, especially after the age of 60, what happens to your immune system and what is available to try to reverse those changes so that you're not predisposed to a bunch of the problems that are associated with an aging immune system, which are, as you probably know, susceptibility to infections, reactivation of viruses, infections of all sort, as well as a net inflammatory state, which we'll talk about, because once you get an understanding of these things, I think it'll give you a little bit more of an impetus to maybe make some changes in your life once you get an understanding of actually what's happening. So tonight's class, we're going to start to narrow the time. So we've been, this is I think our 15th week for everyone on Instagram. This is our 15th week that we have been doing a live class. It's usually around an hour, but tonight we're going to go somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes. As always, if you have any questions, please do type them into the chat box on Zoom or obviously on Instagram. I'll be looking down here and seeing if you have any questions, so feel free to let me know. I'm sharing my screen on Zoom. However, everything that I say, I'm pretty much going to be making very, very clear, just lecturing it. So don't worry about that. For everyone that's on Instagram, you'll get a clear understanding of what's happening. So on the screen now, we have basically what the goals are here for tonight. We're going to be talking about what is the situation when it comes to having a youthful immune system, understanding what happens with your aging immune system. Then we'll talk about what the immune goal is. And believe it or not, it's very easy to understand. And obviously we're covering this on a very superficial level, but it's really all you need to know. You don't need to have an advanced degree in immunology to understand what happens to your immune system as you get older. It's very, very simple to understand. And I hope by the end of this class, you'll get a clear understanding of what that is. Once you have an understanding of the situation, as I said, we'll talk about what the goal is in terms of affecting your immune system. And then we'll finish by talking about lifestyle and supplement suggestions that are going to impact your overall immune system. So let's get started and discuss what is actually going on when your immune system is getting older. And we'll define a few terms first, and then we'll talk about what's going on. Just welcome Nurse Jekka, Maya, Guzman Jadalin, a bunch of people coming in on Instagram. All right, so let's move the screen over here and close a few of these windows. And I don't want you to see these, for people who don't know anything about the immune system, we're going to be talking about what you see on your screen, which is basically immune senescence, understanding naive T cells, memory T cells, natural killer cells, interleukin-6 and senescent cells. It sounds very, very technical. You'll understand this very, very soon. It's not a difficult thing. So first of all, let's talk about immune senescence. Now, immune senescence basically just means aging. So the dictionary definition of immune senescence is basically the aging of the immune system, particularly its effect on changes in lymphocyte development and function, which basically means, you know, your white blood cells, it's affecting your white blood cells that fight infection, predisposes older adults to a higher risk of latent virus activation. which is like if you get, say, shingles. Shingles is reactivation of a latent virus that lives in your nerves. It's like the chickenpox virus, and it can come out because of this aging of the immune system. So what happens around the age of 60 is that you have something called naive T cells and you have memory T cells. And we'll explain what those are. And again, I'm using words that some of you have heard of and many of you haven't. You'll understand these very, very quickly. So don't worry about the names, you'll understand what they are. And honestly, when this happens, when your naive T cells drop and your memory T cells increase too much, you are going to have dysfunction in your immune system. And as a result of that, unfortunately, that's going to lead to many of the causes of death, whether that is death from influenza or pneumonia, these sorts of things that happen. We all are now watching the news every day about COVID, and COVID saying that, kids that are young have very low risk and people who are elderly have a much higher risk. Well, you'll understand why that is in just a few moments. So let's first talk about naive T cells. So naive T cells are your immune cells of your immune system that they call them naive because they haven't been exposed to anything else yet, haven't been exposed to anything. So it's like it's waiting there, and a naive T cell sees something, it processes it of something like a foreign body, and essentially it turns into what's called an effector cell, effector T cell, which is basically a cell that does something, has an effect. And then once it's done, the body remembers that particular thing. It's sort of like if you had a dog and the dog smells something, and let's say you trained the dog to smell something and attack. So the dog smells it, and essentially the dog is like a naive T cell. It smells it, and then when it has been taught the first time around what it is, it attacks it. That would be the effector T cell. And then the dog sits back, and a year later, he smells that thing that he's supposed to attack. And while he's sitting there waiting, he would be what's called a memory T cell. He's sort of waiting there to smell something that he recognizes. And when he smells it, then he attacks. The memory T cell gets activated, the immune system gets activated, and it rapidly attacks what it recognizes. So these things are essentially responsible. It's really a remarkable thing if you think about it. Your immune system processes something from the outside, whether it's an infection or a foreign body or whatever it is able to store what it is. And then when it sees it again, it's capable of activating. So the naive T cell is like that dog that's just waiting. Then it's exposed to a smell that it can recognize and remember. And then it sits around, it's sort of like a memory T cell, and it smells it, and then it gets activated. So that is essentially what naive T cells and memory T cells are. So naive T cells are also involved in cancer because your immune system is also involved in cancer as well. It's not just infections. And then your memory T cells, the dictionary definition is a small portion of long-lived T cells that remains for rapid response upon pathogen re-exposure. This kind of cell is called memory T cells because memory T cells have been trained to recognize specific antigens or say things from the outside, let's say. They will trigger a faster and stronger immune response after encountering the same antibody. So as an example, so that you can sort of conceptualize this a little bit better, when it comes to an allergy to, let's say, poison ivy, when your body first processes poison ivy, the reaction usually can take up to a week or two before the rash develops. And oftentimes that first time, it's not actually that strong of a reaction. But your body has memory T cells, and therefore your body remembers the poison ivy. And of course, in this case, pathologically responds. But the second time that your body sees poison ivy, your reaction is going to start in 24 to 48 hours because it's like that dog. It recognizes, my dog is barking. It's like a dog. It recognizes what it is, understands what it is, and is able to activate it very, very quickly. The problem, however, is that when you have these memory T cells sitting around a long time, the excessive ones, the old memory cells that over a long lifetime are sort of building after years and years of exposure, and sometimes as a result of sort of chronic viral infections and all just things that happen in life, you can get these excessive memory T cells, and these are associated with a general inflammation as well as an increase in coronary artery disease as well. So I think you're probably starting to guess what's going to be happening as you get older. But I'll tell you, so just to ward off the suspense, your naive T cells, as you get older, decrease. Your memory T cells increase. And when that happens, when you have too few naive T cells and too many memory T cells, that is what is essentially aging your immune system. And as a result of that, it causes obviously an inability to respond properly, as well as a general inflammatory state. And so the rest of the class tonight, we're going to be talking really about that, as well as something else that we'll get to in just a moment. The next thing, so now we understand immune senescence, aging of the immune system, generally speaking. We understand what's happening with these naive T cells that are waiting to they're like waiting for their chance to start working. Memory T cells, now there's something called a natural killer cell. And this is another cell that doesn't need to process anything. It's like ready to go. It's like that dog that is going to just attack anything that walks through the door. It doesn't need to smell it before it understands what it is. So it's the dog that attacks right away. And we need to have these around because they are part of our immune system. Not having them is going to result in all kinds of negative problems with your ability to respond to things in your body. A dictionary definition is a lymphocyte able to bind certain tumor cells and virus-infected cells without the stimulation of antigens and kill them by insertion of granules containing perforin, which basically causes the cell to break open. But the point is that they don't need to recognize, let's say, in the same way that the naive T cell processes it and then becomes an effector cell that attacks and then gets stored as a memory T cell. What's happening with the general inflammation is that your body is creating something called interleukin-6. Now, interleukin-6 is what's called a cytokine. And cytokines are parts of the immune system. They sort of recruit the immune system, and they are inflammatory in nature. Now, with all this talk of inflammation, it's important to understand that inflammation has a role in the normal process of your body. When your body is creating inflammation, it's often there to recruit immune cells to get rid of something or to repair something. And there's supposed to be inflammation. Inflammation is a natural part of living. It's a natural part of the processing of damage in your body. It's in order to get rid of that damage, you need inflammation that brings cells in to do their work. The problem is when things get overboard, when things are completely go overboard. And one of the cytokines that is released is called interleukin-6. And interleukin-6 is found very commonly as a feature of lots of different things, but it's also a very predominant feature of aging of the immune system. And in general, it's just in general an inflammatory marker. It correlates very well with autoimmune diseases, like in rheumatoid arthritis. Actually, the higher the level of interleukin-6, IL-6, generally speaking, you could say that the rheumatoid arthritis is active. In aging, when you have it, it is also known as inflammaging, because when you get this IL-6, it increases all the a lot of the factors that are signs of aging, but it's related to weaker bones, heart valve damage, neuronal damage, basically damage of many, many different tissues. And this is happening essentially as a consequence of natural aging. I mean, it just is one of these things where when you think about it in such a way that natural aging is something that you really, when you think about what happens, it almost is like a disease state in a sense. And there are people, anti-aging specialists and people in the sort of longevity science that really believe that when you really start to look at what's happening with aging, that it should actually, I know this sounds peculiar to people who think of aging as sort of inevitable and, one of these things, but a lot of people are, because they're understanding things a little bit better and seeing the very, specific things that are happening, thinking of aging as a type of disease because there are certain things you can do to get rid of it. Now, that doesn't mean that we're trying to live forever or anything of the sort. What it means is that some of the things that we're going to be discussing, I mean, if you could reduce these things that we're talking about, then, a lot of times you're treating these things. So you're treating aging, and therefore some people consider that to be like a disease. I guess it's semantics, but we all want to live as long as possible, as healthy as possible. And when you understand what's going on with aging, it gives you a little bit of a better perspective in terms of how to maybe decide that you want to do something about it. So how is IL-6 related to various things? This was really remarkable. Increased IL-6 in men over 80, 118% increased risk of dying when interleukin-6 was elevated. Increased IL-6 showed 174% increased risk for knee osteoarthritis, 78% risk of macular degeneration, and a 63% increased risk of sudden cardiac death. So this is really a remarkable inflammatory marker. It's not just IL-6, obviously. You can't necessarily say that if you were to come up with a medicine that just directly gets rid of IL-6, that you would be able to reverse these things. We're looking at it as a marker. And when you look at natural treatments or natural interventions that have a natural result of lowering IL-6, it's probably a good bet that it's going to be beneficial for you. So now we understand really what's going on with the immune system. To review, we basically, as I said, we have the naive T cells that are decreasing, the memory T cells that are increasing, natural killer cells also drop in number, and we get an inflammatory increase in this cytokine that we're talking about. And now there's one more thing that I wanted to discuss before we get into, just doing a time check here. Okay. Before we get into lifestyle and supplement suggestions and really what the goal is. Now, senescent cells are a very interesting thing, and we're starting to see treatments for this, natural treatments as well. And senescent cells are not necessarily directly related to the immune system, but I think you're going to be seeing this in the news quite a bit over the next 10 years. And so I thought it would be interesting for you to have a little bit of a basic understanding of what's going on. So senescent cells, now they're different from immune senescence. Senescent just basically means, aging. These are aging cells that aren't functioning properly, and they don't die, but they release chemicals that damage the cells around them. So you have these cells, they're not dead. You're getting older, these cells are sticking around, and, crazy thing is they're not just sitting there doing nothing. They are releasing chemicals that cause inflammation, and that's causing a whole host of other aging problems that are happening. And this is sort of the low-level inflammation that's associated with a whole range of age-related problems, including weight gain and metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is sort of that complex of high blood sugar, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, sometimes fatty liver, and it's all associated. All of these things sort of are working together and creating this low-level inflammation that's associated with these senescent cells. So we got these cells. In addition to the immune cells that we've already spoken about, we have these cells scattered around the body that are sitting there, not really functioning, and causing disease, damaging the healthy cells around them. It's a crazy situation that's happening. But researchers at the Mayo Clinic have found that there are chemicals that are called senolytics, lytic meaning to lyse or to kill, that get rid of these cells. And initially, they were looking at several chemotherapy agents that get rid of these cells, one of which was a chemotherapy agent for leukemia. And actually, there are always, self-experimenters out there. And I know of people who are taking this at a low dose along with some of the plant compounds that we're going to be talking about, because they really feel like this is such a major component of aging that they should be taking it themselves. One of the chemicals is called dasatinib, which I believe is still used for leukemia, and they're taking that in combination with several plant compounds, again, that we'll be talking about in just a moment. And this is really leading to a term that I mentioned just a minute or two ago, which is called inflammaging. And this is the definition, the dictionary definition, actually written here in an article, references here. But basically, this inflammaging is inflammation and aging, but it's the inflammation that's happening as a result of aging, and predominantly is happening because of not just the inflammation from IL-6, but these senescent cells releasing a whole host of things. And the definition here given at this article is a condition in which there is an accumulation of inflammatory mediators in tissues has been associated with aging. The source of these inflammatory factors has been proposed to be cells that have acquired a senescence-associated secretory phenotype. We'll talk about that in a second. And this could be acquired by cells once they have aged, or it may occur gradually in various populations over time as they acquire DNA lesions that in turn trigger the production of inflammatory mediators such as IL-6, like we've spoken about. So what he's basically saying here, because that sounds very medical, is just that here's a condition where you're getting inflammation that they're still quite trying to figure out what exactly is going on, whether it's just happening because of aging or it's happening because of recurrent DNA damage. But the point is that these senescent cells are responsible for inflammaging. And by the way, if anyone has any questions, please do let me know. Okay, so we now understand the situation in general with aging. When it comes, there's lots of other factors with aging, and it's probably something that I'll talk about another time. But here I wanted to focus on the immune system because it's in the news so much. And senescent cells, because I find it fascinating, and also because you're going to be seeing some more of these sort of senolytic therapies and articles about it over the coming years. So now you have a clear understanding of what's going on with the immune system. Now, let's talk about what the goal would be. Well, I think you already know what it is. The goal is to increase your naive T cells, increase your natural killer cells, and reduce those memory T cells that are sitting back, not functioning that well, not even able to respond like they used to, and causing inflammation. So we want to increase naive T cells, increase NK, natural killer cells. Remember, the natural killer cells are like the dog that will just attack anything that comes through the door. And then the poorly functioning memory T cells. So what are those lifestyle and supplement suggestions that can do what we're trying to do, what we're trying to get to, this goal that we just discussed? All right, let's get into it. Now, let's just close some of these things here because I don't want to make it look crazy. So I've broken this down into general immune boosters, something called Citan, omega-3s, exercise, PURT, hormone optimization, reishi mushrooms, and then we'll specifically talk about senolytics, which are to get rid of those senescent cells. And before I get into this, I mean, we should really just acknowledge that what I'm about to discuss in terms of general immune boosters, we've spoken about in other classes. And one of the principles I think we should acknowledge almost during every single class that we have is that what's good for one part of the body is almost always good for the rest of the body. We spoke a great deal recently about the gut and how to maintain the proper microbiome, how to microbiome diversity. And we spoke specifically about making sure that we consume around 20 grams of soluble fiber from various different plants, not just taking a supplement. And we spoke last week about mushrooms and how they boost the immune system, because there's a molecule called beta glucan, which is so complex and so amazingly complex that when it's presented to the body actually responds by sort of upping the ante of the immune system and preparing the body for something, even though it's beneficial. So it's boosting the immune system in that way. And of course, we've spoken about optimal levels of vitamin D as well, and how important that is for your immune system. So I think we should always acknowledge that it's very rare. It's going to be a very rare situation where I can't even think of one where I'm going to say that this chemical, this particular thing is great for your heart, but it's terrible for your immune system. The body is a unified thing. And of course, nowadays, the functioning of the gut is tending to be related to everything. But again, everything is going to affect everything else. We're not a body of disparate organs. Everything is working together. And so what helps one thing is just a general rule is going to be generally speaking, supportive and healthy for the rest of the body. So I tell people when it comes to mushrooms, they should be eating mushrooms every day. And if you're interested in learning more about mushrooms, you can go to my YouTube channel, and there's last week's lecture was all about mushrooms. Optimal levels of vitamin D. So everyone should know what their vitamin D level is. It should be somewhere around 40 to 60, somewhere thereabouts. You do not have to wait for your doctor to order a vitamin D level. You can order that on your own. There are labs called Any Labs Now is one company. There's a finger stick kit that you can buy to get a vitamin D level, but you should know what your vitamin D level is. It's very, very important. I could give a whole lecture could be given on vitamin D and its impact across the body in so many different ways. Zinc is particularly good as well. Make sure you don't overdose with zinc. So dosing of zinc is usually only around 15 to 25 milligrams a day, because it can affect if you take too much, it can affect your copper levels, because the two go hand in hand. So 15 to 25 milligrams only. Now let's talk about Citan. It's been known in China for thousands of years. The Chinese medicine and Taoist monks and Taoist doctors of thousands of years, they're the masters in longevity, hands down. And I believe to this day, they are still the masters of longevity. You meet these monks that, they take herbs, they do Qigong every day, and it's not uncommon at some of these monasteries to have monks that are very, very, very old. It works like the goal. In other words, it increases naive T cells, lowers memory T cells, and boosts natural killer cells. So this is something that can be taken as a supplement, and it is very good for reversing some of the effects of aging. Generally speaking, a Mediterranean diet has been shown to help certain indices of aging. Omega-3 the omega-3 ratio has also been shown to be that way. So obviously the Mediterranean diet has been shown to be helpful for a whole host of different things. So exercise. Now exercise, when you first start to exercise, hey Molly, how are you? I see you on Instagram. So with exercise, we spoke about interleukin-6 as this inflammatory factor, right? But when you exercise initially, actually, because you generate inflammation with exercise, you get a spike of IL-6. But as you continue to do exercise, the overall rate, the overall level of IL-6 actually lowers down. And honestly, a lot of people think that if you take a whole host of antioxidants, too many, too much supplementation, and you exercise, you want to have some breakdown of the muscle. You actually want some inflammation happening, because if you don't, then your body is not going to come in and, upgrade the area. So, so the people who overdose on antioxidants can be thwarting some of the effects of exercise, believe it or not. The next one is a PURT. That's how it's pronounced, PUR, I believe. And this does similar to what we spoke about, which is this increase in natural killer cells and T cells has direct antiviral, antibacterial effects. So in addition to increasing your natural killer cells and helping to balance the T cells, as we spoke about, it actually is also antiviral and antibacterial. So there's an additional benefit. Now, PURT is a Chinese tea, again, and prized in China for forever, probably, as something that is helpful for aging. They didn't know memory T cells. They didn't know, natural killer cells, but somehow the majority of them, again, were sort of Taoist, priest, monk, doctors. The traditional Chinese medicine knew these things for thousands of years, and we're just sort of learning about them. Now, PURT is usually sold in these little cakes, and it's a fermented tea. So black tea is oxidized tea. So you have green tea, and then when the green tea is oxidized, it turns black. And so black tea is basically green tea that's essentially been oxidized. PURT is fermented tea. So I believe it's held sort of in a moist state. And again, it's sort of usually found in these little cakes. And you can get it, I would recommend, for all of these things, actually, I would recommend Dragon Herbs, which is a company that I used to shop at at their store, which is really a remarkable store in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica. And the owner is really a remarkable guy and herbologist who has brought in herbs from China for probably 25, 30 years. And they have another tea there called Gynestemma tea, which we've spoken about in another lecture, which is also longevity enhancing, mainly because of other factors, which I don't want to get into here. And you can buy that as well. Another place you can get PUR extract is Life Extension Foundation. They actually have a supplement that has Cistanch, PURT, and Reishi mushrooms combined into one supplement, and they call it, what do they call it? It's some kind of some sort of senescence formula or something like that, and they combine these three into one supplement. I'm always in favor of starting out with trying to get it naturally. Cistanch, I don't think you can. I mean, you can buy it. I don't know how you would naturally take Cistanch. I think it's always sort of been an herb. If anyone knows whether you can eat it, let me know, but I don't believe that's the case. I think it's always been an herb. PURT, though, is prized, and in China it can be very, very expensive because they ferment it, and it can be fermented for many, many years, and I believe the cost goes up as the fermentation goes up, and probably means that there is more beneficial factors involved in the PuRT, but that's another thing. Now, I put hormone optimization with a question mark only because it's not something that I'm not an expert in hormone optimization at the present moment. I do know that there are people that take what's called DHEA. Run Bitterun's asking, what was the first story you mentioned? It's called dragon herbs, and it's for a keto travelgram. This T is spelled PU-ERH. It's pronounced PUR, but it's PU-ERH. See, and the store is called Dragon Herbs, and you can Google Dragon Herbs. And I would recommend both getting the PuRT and the Gynestemma tea. And I think, again, the Chinese have figured out a lot of this stuff out 1,000 years ago, remarkably. And teas are a good thing to add to your diet in general, because it allows you, I'm drinking a green tea. Obviously, some people are sensitive to caffeine and such, but try these sorts of medicinal teas, and Dragon Herbs is a great resource. I have no connection with them, but when I first entered Dragon Herbs in Santa Monica, probably, I don't know, 18 years ago, roughly, I was blown away by the story, and I had it's just sort of, I don't know what it looks like now, but it's sort of a magical store with herbs on the wall and big glass jars, and just sort of a really interesting place. And the guy in there, I can't remember his name, just is just a genius when it comes to herbs and such. I have a friend who works for a company called Active Herbs. He's a writer for them, and they sell, of course, all these things as well, and specialize in Chinese herbs. So getting back to hormone optimization, basically, some people take DHEA, which is sort of a precursor molecule, and can be converted into estrogen, generally in women, and it can be converted into testosterone in men, but it can also be converted into estrogen in men as well. So it's been shown to reduce certain indices of aging. But again, it's one of those things that probably you should discuss with an endocrinologist if you're going to embark on that. I'm certainly not an expert on that. Reishi mushrooms, we spoke about that last week, actually. And it helps both innate and adaptive immunity. So innate is like the natural killer cell, and adaptive is what we were speaking about before with memory T cells and such. It benefits that, and also has a direct antiviral activity and anti-cancer activity. So reishi mushrooms are actually found now in a lot of different things. I was at a food show before COVID, and I was given a sample of cacao mixed with reishi from the company, blanking on the name of the company, but they make a reishi and cacao, raw cacao mix. And reishi mushrooms, as we discussed last week, are sort of a woody mushroom. You can buy the sort of spears, reishi spears, and you can make a tea out of it. It's not an edible mushroom in the sense that it's like wood, so you can't really eat it, but you can use it two ways, as I spoke about last week. There are the water-soluble components, so of the beneficial parts of the reishi mushroom, which you can make by making a tea. But you can also make an alcohol concoction where you can put the spears into gin or vodka, any kind of alcohol, and the terpenes, which are the beneficial alcohol-soluble chemicals, can actually be taken out. And in China, again, of course, they figured this out. In China, before they knew that one thing was alcohol soluble and one was water, they didn't quite understand it, but they sort of knew. And they would make these little alcohol tinctures, and that would be made with various mushrooms to get out the beneficial chemicals of the reishi mushroom. So those are some things that affect the immune system. Generally speaking, try to get them as best as you can from whole food sources. Obviously, reishi and cistanche are are herbs that you would need to buy from an herbal company. But try to get, as I said, focus mostly on these general immune boosters, which is getting your optimal vitamin D level, taking zinc, having mushrooms on a daily, cooked mushrooms on a daily basis. Watch my video class from last week, and optimizing your gut microbiome, because believe it or not, something like 70% of your immune system surrounds your gut. So if you want a healthy immune system, you want to have a healthy gut. And it actually makes sense if you think about it, because when it comes to your skin, you've got a thick layer called the stratum corneum, which protects your body against the outside. Believe it or not, and it's the corneum, this dead layer of skin, is really very good at keeping the outside out. In your intestine, you have one cell layer, literally one cell layer, preventing all the stuff that you put into your body from getting out of your intestine into your body. And that's why it's important to make sure that your gut is so healthy, because that one cell layer, it can be damaged very easily. And when it's damaged, things can get leaked through and cause all kinds of abnormal immune responses. So take care of your gut, get that soluble plant fiber, and watch my lecture on that as well, so you get a better understanding of that. And to end tonight's lecture, let's quickly talk about the senolytics. So we spoke about, for those people who have just come on, we spoke about these senescent cells, which are basically cells that are sitting there. They're not doing anything functioning wise, but they're releasing chemicals. They're not dead. They refuse to die, but they're causing damage to all the cells around them. And as I said, researchers at the Mayo Clinic found a whole host of bioactive compounds that are able to remove these cells. Now, the Life Extension Foundation has a product called the senolytic activator, which has T theoflavins, quercetin, and apigenin. And both of these are plant-derived. Apigenin commonly found in several vegetables. One is like celery, as an example. Quercetin found in a lot of different things. Black tea theoflavins. And they felt that this combination was very, very powerful, and they formulated that into a product that you could take. And I think I would recommend that if you're over 60, that you consider, obviously, don't rely on this supplement. Work on everything else that we've spoken about during all of these classes, but consider taking that. I would consider taking that supplement. But let's go through the examples that this researcher by the name of Malavolta in 2018 came up with. So examples of these natural bioactive compounds include curcumin. So we know what that is. It's from turmeric. EGCG from green tea. Fisetin, which has a lot of potential. It's from, sorry, moving the screen around here. It's from strawberries, but I believe they're having some trouble sort of isolating it or making it bioavailable, something of that sort. Genisteins found in soy. Floritin, I'm not sure where floritin is found, but it's actually also good for your skin. There's several creams that have that in it. Blanking on what plant it comes from. Quercetin, which is also, quite frankly, in the news because it's been recommended for COVID. Taking zinc, quercetin has been recommended by various natural health authorities like Dr. Weil. Resveratrol obviously is from grapes, and silibin is from milk thistle, as well as allicin from onions, garlic, and PEITC, which is found in cruciferous vegetables like watercress, especially sulforaphane, which is also found in cruciferous vegetables. And again, all of these compounds we should be getting, if we follow the general rule that we've learned over the last 15 weeks, is that we want to get multiple families of plants, don't just eat broccoli and kale. They're in the same family. You have to switch and go through different families. And I always go back to Dr. Furman's G bombs, greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. You should be getting all of those, a small dose of those every single day, because those cover a whole host of plant classes, plant families, and is going to diversify things so that you get a lot of the things that we're talking about. But because aging is really one of those things that we want to be, as you get older, you really want to be proactive. Again, I would recommend that you look into some of the supplements as well, but not to the exclusion of everything that we've been speaking about tonight. That's probably the most important thing. We spoke about the very first time we got together, and this is where I'm going to end it, about the 80-20 rule, where 20% of the inputs yields 80% of the effects, and 80% of the effects yield 20% of the results. So we want to focus on those vital few things that are going to make the most effect. And quite frankly, getting the basics of nutrition is always going to outweigh these sort of supplements that I might be mentioning. But when it comes to sort of some of these mushrooms have been known for thousands of years in China and are now being proven to help with the signs of aging, I'd say if you're over 60, go for it. I would recommend it. I'd recommend you take a reishi mushroom. I would recommend the senolytic activator from Life Extension. I'd buy some tea, the pu'er tea, or again, you can buy it as a supplement. But as always, don't expect those sort of supplements to overpower the effects of bad lifestyle, bad gut health, and the whole host of other things that we've spoken about over the last 15 weeks. So that is tonight's class. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to close this down. To summarize basically this class, I hope that we achieved the goal, my goal, which was basically for you to understand what happens with the immune system as you get older, and to give you some remedies and suggestions as to what you can do to reverse some of the damage that's happening with your immune system. And I believe this is one of those things that you should be absolutely proactive about. There was an article in Life Extension Foundation, which is a very great resource. And they spoke about the premature death of Jack LaLanne. He lived to 94, but there was he died of pneumonia after a heart surgery. And, if he had that heart surgery when he was in his 40s, he probably wouldn't have died of pneumonia. And that's why they called it sort of the premature death, because if his immune system, if he had, he was, as you all know, this really remarkable guy, but even he succumbed to pneumonia at an elderly age. And so what can we do to reverse some of these things? And I don't think any of us should consider them to be foregone conclusions, because there is science, there's active science that's happening now. And I believe all of us really should be, especially for people in our families that we love and such, we should be discussing some of these things. If you are over the age of 60, or you're getting into your 50s, just the general recommendations that I spoke about and having sort of an idea of what we spoke about, I think is going to be beneficial. So thank you again for your attention. I look forward to, actually next week, we'll be talking about the endocannabinoid system. And so Keto Travelgram, if you go to Dr. J. Carp on YouTube, you'll see all the videos, all 15 weeks. Next week, we'll be talking about the endocannabinoid system and why it's mislabeled. Sorry, I'm just looking at the questions. First of all, let me stop sharing my screen here. Okay, stop share. Okay. So let's see. Someone's asking if this is the tea that I'm recommending. That's the yes, that's the Gynostema tea. It's not the. There's a link that someone posted. That's the Gynostema tea, and I do recommend that, actually. It's good for blood sugar control too. Whoops. Oh, my screen is going crazy here. So we'll be talking about the endocannabinoid system, and that is what's popular now because CBD is so popular. But the reason I wanted to talk about it is because it's not just activated by CBD. There's a lot of money in cannabis these days. I'm focusing this lecture on the things that activate the endocannabinoid system that are not cannabis. And why it's important, because this system is throughout the entire body and is really remarkable at calming inflammation and balancing the immune system. There's a whole host of things, and you don't need to activate it through cannabis. You can activate it through things like lavender, as an example. But anyway, there's a it's a really remarkable thing, this endocannabinoid system, and I hope all of you will be there next week at 8 p.m. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate everyone for sticking around. Everyone, Christopher, Helen, Lewis, Linda, Loretta, Mary, Pat, Patrick, Ryan, Sharon, Sheila, Vicky, and a whole host of people here on Instagram, Keto Travelgram, Hungry Gals. Who else? Amali's here, Run Britta Run, and a whole host of other people that I can't get to. Appreciate everyone's attention tonight. Had a great time. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a lot and can do something practical about what we spoke about. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care.